This is Algebra 2 Academic 8.1 and 8.2 notes, how to solve quadratic equations by completing the square, and how to solve quadratic equations with using the quadratic formula, okay? So let's switch. It's a fractal. That's so weird. All right, are we going to switch to my iPad soon or no?
We're going down the rabbit hole.
All right, this is a little stressful.
Oh no.
Oh, there we go. Whew.
Yay.
All right, so 8.1 notes. Okay, solving quadratic equations. So solving an equation means we get x by itself. Okay, it doesn't change meaning. Does anyone know what a quadratic equation is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's that very long thing.
Okay. All right. On the right track. So
Plus, minus.
that's the quadratic formula. Yeah, you're on the right. You're skipping ahead to 8.2. A quadratic equation. That's just an equation with degree 2. Do you guys remember degree for like a polynomial?
Yeah.
So it has an x squared in it. So that it has degree 2. The highest exponent on x is 2 in a quadratic equation. Okay? That's what a quadratic equation is, okay? Thank you. All right, that's what it is. Okay.
So we divide everything by 2.
No. Okay. So one way you can solve these, and this is a special case, is you can use the square root property. You use this when. So use when there is no x term. Okay. What I mean by that, okay, so there's two terms in this equation, okay, there's an x squared term, okay, there's a term that has x squared as its variable, there's a term that has 9 as its variable, okay, that's a constant term, okay, sorry, did I say 9 as its variable? It doesn't have a variable. There's a term that has 9, just 9, no variable, okay? There's no term that has just a regular old x in it, okay? There's no like 4x or, all right, so you guys know what I mean, okay? So that's what I mean by there's no x term, okay? So when that's the case, we can use the square root property. It's a lot easier than these other two ways of solving, okay? So to use the square root property, step 1, okay? Get the squared part by itself. Okay, get the squared part by itself, okay? And then step 2 is take the square root of both sides. Square root of both sides. Don't forget your plus minus. Plus minus sign. Okay. All right. So get the square. Sometimes the squared part will just be x squared. Sometimes it'll be like multiple terms that are squared. It's whatever is like inside the square, like inside the exponent of 2, and you'll see what that means. You got to get that by itself. Okay. So is it by itself here? Yeah, it is, yeah. And then I just take the square root of both sides, okay? So I'm going to do the square root of x squared equals the square root of 9. What's the square root of x squared? Okay, so let it be known that the square root symbol and the like exponent of 2 symbol cancel each other out. Boom, okay? So on the left, we just have x, okay? On the right, so that equals what? Very close. Plus or minus 3, yep. So this is a really, really, really weird distinction in math, okay? I didn't fully understand it until my freshman year of college, okay? Yeah. Yep. So really weird distinction, okay? If you come across a problem and the teacher asks you, like, okay, what's the square root of 9, okay? The square root of 9 is mathematically defined as just positive 3, okay? Okay, all right? Okay. So if the square root is like already in there in the problem, you don't worry about plus or minus 3. What's really weird, if your teacher asks you what numbers satisfy this equation, x squared equals 9, well, you have to write in your own square root symbol. Whenever you have to write in your own square root symbol, you got to do a plus minus, because there are two numbers that satisfy this equation, okay, 3 and negative 3. Really weird distinction, okay, if you didn't really follow what I just said, just remember if you have to write in your own square root symbol, do a plus minus. Otherwise, don't worry about it. So I have two solutions here. All right, I have x equals positive 3 and x equals negative 3, okay?
Could you just write that?
I prefer if you split them up, just so we know. Yeah, let's say you have to. No.
So like if we forget to do that on like a test or if you say don't forget the plus or minus symbol, what's the point of putting it if you want us to write them separately?
Because the plus or minus symbol reminds you to write them separately.
Could you put on the test like write separately if needed to kind of like?
Yeah, I will. Guys, don't worry too much about that. Let's just practice doing it that way. I want you guys to really I want it to hit home that there are two solutions to some of these, okay? Many of these have two solutions. All right, so for B, is the square part by itself?
Yes.
Yes, it is, okay? And I can use the square root property because there's no x term. It's just an x squared and a constant, okay? So I do what now? Square root both sides. All right, so so it's plus or minus the square root of 20. What's the square root of 20 simplified to? 2 root 5, yeah.
Good job, guys.
So one solution is x equals positive 2 root 5, and the other one is x equals negative 2 root 5. All right.
So you do.
All right. What about C? Is there an x term in C? There's an x squared term, but there's no term that has just normal x. Okay, so we can use the square root property. Okay.
Wait, what?
You said get something by itself.
Yeah, so we're going to use the square root property. So the first step is to get the squared part by itself. What part of this equation is squared? Well, just the x. Just the x is squared. The only thing that has an exponent of 2 is the x. So let's get that x squared by itself. So I need to subtract 72. Okay, and then I'm going to divide by 2. So now I have x squared by itself, okay? I have just the square stuff by itself. Now I do what at this point? Square root. So I have x equals plus or minus 6i. All right, that's it.
So is that a section?
What?
Somebody was just looking around the classroom.
All right, D. Okay, D is a good one. Do I have the square part by itself? I do. All right. So that's why I wrote square part and not just x squared in the steps, okay? So x minus 5, everything inside these parentheses gets squared, right? This whole binomial gets squared, okay? There's nothing on the left side of this equal sign that doesn't get squared, right? So I say that the square part is by itself. That's what I mean by that, okay? So I can just hop right into step 2, okay? I can hop right into step 2. So I'm just going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, what do I have on the left side? X minus 5. Yeah, so the 2 just goes away. The exponent of 2 just goes away. On the right I have plus or minus 5, okay?
Oh wait, that's.
I'm trying to get x by itself, so I need to add 5 to both sides to get rid of that 5.
What did you have to split it up now? Like do 5
Yeah,
plus 5
that's a very good
minus
distinction.
5?
Yeah, you have to split it up now. So my answers are going to be 5 plus or minus 5. So one answer is 5 plus 5. Okay? The other answer is 5 minus 5. That's how plus or minus symbols work. Okay? 5 plus 5 is 10. 5 minus 5 is 0. So my two solutions are 0 and 10. How can I always check my answers when I'm solving an equation? Just plug them back in for x. Yeah, thank you. All right. So let's get through the first example of completing the square, then we can go to lunch, okay? So bear with me, okay? All right? All right, so now we're going to do completing the square, okay? It's hard at first, okay? It's something you've never seen before, okay? You never saw it in Algebra 1, okay? But it's the same steps over and over again, okay? So you're going to get really good at it once you get a lot of practice, okay? So you're going to be stressed at first, you're going to be anxious at first, but when you see it 4 times, you're going to start to catch on, okay? It's like baking your favorite recipe at home. You know, the first time you make it, it's kind of mediocre. The second time, it's a little bit better. Third time you make it, it's even better. Fourth time you make it, it's a little better. Fifth time's like even better. And then like, you know, 6th, 7th, 8th times, it's like you can do it in your sleep with your eyes closed, okay? 6th time, like it's just phenomenal, right? Actually, the marginal gains probably decrease, so probably it's like kind of like a curve, like a square root curve. Anyway, so first thing you need to do, make sure you're in standard form. Make sure in standard form. Make sure you're in standard form. What does standard form mean again? Okay. Standard form means there's a 0 on one side of the equation.
And the x on the other.
And then the lead coefficient is positive. What's the lead coefficient again?
The first thing.
Yeah, the first thing. The lead coefficient is the number that's next to x squared here, okay? So my lead coefficient here is 1. 1 is a positive number. I have 0 on one side, so I'm in standard form. All right? Yeah, let's go. I'm in standard form. All right. Just for the sake of time, you guys maybe right when we leave for lunch, you want to just take a picture of these steps with your iPad or something? You want to just write them? Yeah, just write them all down then right now. No, I didn't either. That's why I wrote them on the whiteboard. Just write them on your whiteboard. You guys don't have a whiteboard like I do? No. All right, so completing the square has 4 steps. There's 4 steps once I'm in standard form, okay? There's 4 steps, okay? I'll go ahead and make sure I point the camera at them so people can see on YouTube. All right, pause the video, write it down. Okay, cool. All right, first step, I need to check to see if the lead coefficient is 1 or not. If it's not 1, I need to factor it out of just the first 2 terms. It is 1 here, so I can skip step 1. This is driving me crazy. So.
Could you just do it to the right for a second?
Oh yeah, sorry. All right, so my lead coefficient is 1 here. That's a horrible one. That's driving me crazy. So I can skip the first step. I'm actually going to skip step 1 for a lot of these, okay? Step 2, wow, okay? I'm going to highlight the coefficient that's next to the x term, okay? I'm going to highlight the coefficient next to x, that positive 20. I'm going to highlight that, okay? That's my best friend number for this problem, okay? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that number, in this case it's positive 20. I'm going to divide it by 2. That gives me 10. Okay, and then I'm going to square that result. That gives me 100. Okay? I took 20, right? That's the number next to x. I divided it by 2, and then I squared it. So that's 20 divided by 2 is 10. 10 squared is 100.
Is that just like a step that you do every single time?
Yeah, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 100 to both sides of this equation. But I'm not going to combine my like terms on the left, okay? I'm just going to write it like this. It's going to be x squared plus 20x plus 100 plus 30 equals 100. Okay? Are there any, here's why. Here's why it is necessary. Here's why I did that, okay?
Oh, we have to factor it out.
Yeah, x squared plus 20x plus 100. Perfect squared trinomial, okay?
Wait, hold on. What?
Very formulaic.
Wow.
Very formulaic, okay?
Bruh.
You guys, this factor is very formulaically. It's always a binomial squared, so just 2 terms squared, okay? And there's still the plus 30. There's still the plus 30 equals 100 there. Okay? The first term inside these parentheses is always x, so just write an x in there. All right? All right, and then the second number is always my yellow highlighted number divided by 2. So what's positive 20 divided by 2? Positive 10, so plus 10. All right, now I can use the square root property. I'm done completing the square. So the last step is get x by itself with the square root property, okay?
Oh my god.
So I need to get the square part by itself. So here's the square part. Let me get it by itself, so I'm going to subtract 30. All right, I got all the square stuff by itself, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I have x plus 10 equals the square, equals plus or minus root 70. Can I simplify that at all? I don't think I can. No, 70 has no perfect square factor, so I can't simplify it. So then we gotta get x by itself, so subtract 10 from both sides. X equals negative 10 plus or minus root 70, okay? So my two solutions are negative 10 plus root 70, and x equals negative 10 minus root 70, okay?
You can just technically do it as x equals 10.
So get a good picture of these steps with your iPad or something, and then come back at 12:30. No, I'm not going to. At this table, everybody matters. At this table, everyone is welcome.
Let me show you how to do the table. Dude, I just straight up brought the thing to hand because I didn't have time. I brought the ingredients. Yeah. Alright. Oh, chill.
this table, everybody matters. It's stuck in my head so badly.
It's a great song. It is a good song.
It's a great song. I hate orange Expo markers. Oh, that one's actually really
It's like on your eyebrows. I was just getting into those wings.
good.
No, it was the first time seeing those songs.
That one's a little faded.
What?
This marker's a little faded.
Also did.
Hey!
Hey! He's nonchalant about it. It's nice. It's casual.
That's the first time I've ever made it. I have 12:30. We gotta keep going. Too bad for that. Okay. All right. Mine's standard form. No, I'm not. What do I need to do to get in standard form? Yeah, I need to subtract 35 from both sides. Yeah, it's 12:30. Yeah, I don't care. Too bad for them. I told them we're starting at 12:30. All right, what's my so I need to check. I need first step, right, in completing the square. What's my lead coefficient? It's 1, okay? Since it's 1, I get to skip step 1, okay? Step 1 stinks. It really stinks. So I get to go straight to step 2, okay? I get to go straight to step 2. All right. What's step 2? What number do I highlight? That -2. That's right next to x. Yep. All right, so I highlight that. I do what with it? I take that -2. I divide it by 2. And then I square that result, okay? -2 divided by 2 is -1. -1 squared is +1. Okay? +1. Okay? What do I do with that +1 that I just came up with? Yeah, so I'm going to add it to both sides of the equation, but I'm not going to combine any like terms. So it's going to be -2x plus 1 minus 35 equals 1. Okay? All right. Now, step 3, does anyone remember what I do at this point? Yeah, so I can take those 3 terms at the beginning, right, and I can rewrite them as a binomial squared, okay? Binomial squared. I still have that -35 equals 1, okay? But inside those parentheses, what do I write? The first term is always what? X, and the second one is always what?
Square root of the plus.
Yeah, so you take the yellow highlight number, you divide it by 2 again, but you don't square it this time. See, it's just -1. Just -1 in this example, okay? Now, at that point, we're done completing the square. Okay, now we can just use the square. I shouldn't say just, okay? But now we can use the square root property to get x by itself. So we first want to get all the squared stuff by itself, so let's add 35 to both sides. All right. Now I have all the squared stuff by itself, right? Everything on the left side of the equation is squared. How do I undo that square? Just square root both sides. So we get x minus 1 equals plus or minus 6. Okay? All right, and then to get x by itself, I just have to add 1 to both sides. All right, so x equals 1 plus or minus 6. So one solution is x equals 1 plus 6, which is 7. The other solution is x equals 1 minus 6, which is -5. And again, I can always check my answers by plugging them back into the original equation. Okay. All right, so that's how you complete the square. All right? All right? All right?
Sorry.
All right. Okay. Right. Don't worry about it today. If it becomes a habitual thing, that's the only. It's not a habitual thing for you guys, so. All right, can I move on to C? I'll move on to C. All right, am I in standard form? Am I in standard form? Yes, right, I got a 0 on one side. My lead coefficient is positive, okay? All right, what's my lead coefficient here?
6.
It's 1. Lead coefficient is the one next to x squared. Yeah, no, but you're on the right track. So, right, I only have to do step 1 if the lead coefficient's not 1. So I get to skip step 1, okay? I don't like step 1, so we're going to go straight to step 2, okay? I'm going to highlight what number? That negative 6 right there, right? That's right next to x, okay? What do I do with it? Divided by 2, and then I square that result, okay? So this is negative 3 squared, which equals positive 9, okay? What do I do with that positive 9? I add it to both sides. So x squared minus 6x plus 9 plus 33. I'm not going to combine like terms on the left equals 9. Okay? All right. Then I have these 3 terms right here. What can I rewrite those as? So I'm going to do parentheses squared. What goes inside the parentheses? The first term is always x. The second one is what? It's negative 6 divided by 2. So I take that yellow highlighted number, I divide it by 2, but I don't square it. So it's going to be negative 3. Yep. And then I still got the plus 33 equals 9. Right there. All right. Now at this point, we're done completing the square. We can use the square root property just like we did at the beginning of this lesson. So let's get the square stuff by itself. Okay, we get x minus 3 quantity squared equals, what is that, negative 24? All right, and I have to take the square root. We're ready to take the square root down. Okay, x minus 3 equals square root of negative 24 simplifies to what? Plus or minus, is that 2I root 6? Plus or minus 2I root 6 is what it simplifies to. Okay. And then the last thing we have to do to get x by itself, so we just have to add that 3 over. So we have x equals 3 plus or minus 2I root 6, okay? So my 2 solutions are 3 plus 2I root 6 and x equals 3 minus 2I root 6. Those will both work. Yeah.
But is there a wrong? So what if I like did the plus or minus after the 2I root 6?
If you did like 3,
Like on the like this. You're gonna say.
yeah,
Like if I put it behind.
that's wrong. Yeah.
That's wrong.
Yeah, it has to be in front of the square roots. Whatever you took the square root of, yeah. Very good question. All right. Can I move on to D? I think I'll move on to D real quick. Am I in standard form?
Yes.
Yes, I am in standard form, okay? What's my lead coefficient? Yes, so once again, I can skip step 1, okay? All right? It's not fun to do step 1, okay? What do I do now? Highlight that number highlight the number that's right next to x. Okay, that's 3. What do I do with that 3? You divide it by 2, okay, and then you square that. Results. 3 halves squared is 9/4, okay? Okay, what do I do with that 9/4? I'm just going to add it to both sides. So add a 9/4 on the left, don't combine like terms, add a 9/4 on the right. All right. Okay, then I can rewrite these 3 terms as what? So a binomial squared, what goes inside the parentheses? X, and then what's the second number? 3 halves. Yep, I just take that yellow highlighted number, I divide it by 2. I don't square it the second time around. And then I still have a plus 10 equals 9/4. Okay. Now we can use the square root property. We can use the square root property to solve for x. So let's get the squared stuff. Let's get the red stuff by itself. The part that gets squared. Okay. All right, so I have x plus 3/2 quantity squared equals 9/4 minus 10. I'm going to do that in my calculator.
49/4.
Got negative 31/4. You plus 10. All right. Now I can take the square root of both sides. All right, so that square cancels with the square root. Okay, so I have x plus 3/2 equals. Do you guys forget how to take the square root of a fraction? So the square root of 31/4, when you have a square root of a fraction, it's the same thing as the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. So it's just this. All right, and then there's an I in there since it's negative, so I'll write that in. You just split the square root up, square root of the top number over the square root of the bottom number. Yeah, good question. So this becomes I root 31 all over 2. Okay. Oh, plus or minus. So sorry, forgot my plus or minus. Okay. Now to get x by itself, I just got to subtract that 3/2 over. So my answer is, x equals negative 3/2 plus or minus I root 31 over 2. So one solution is x equals negative 3/2 plus I root 31 all over 2. X equals negative 3/2 minus I root 31 over 2. That's it. All right, are we feeling a little more comfortable with this maybe? All right, so it's new, a little weird, but it's the same set of steps every single time, okay? This is my favorite way to solve quadratic equations because I don't have to memorize anything, okay? And it doesn't really require much critical thought. I don't have to be that creative. Yeah, what's that question? Okay, you just kind of follow the steps every time. All right. I might skip E for now, just because I feel like we've done enough examples of skip. We need to do the examples where we don't get a skip number 1, okay? So that's F is one of those, okay? Can I move on to F? Okay, I'm going to move on to F. All right, so this is driving me crazy. I'm going to erase that, okay. Am I in standard form? I am in standard form. Standard form just means there's a 0 and then the lead coefficient is positive. What were you saying no to, though? Is my lead coefficient 1? No, yeah. So my lead coefficient is not 1 this time. It's actually 2, okay? So I have to do number 1, okay? I have to do step 1, okay? This changes things up a little bit, okay? So the first thing I got to do is I got to factor out this 2 from the lead coefficient, but only from these 2 terms right here, okay? Factor it out from those 2 terms. So it's going to be 2 times x squared minus 8x. I'm actually going to leave a little bit of space there before I put the right parentheses, so you'll see why. And plus 41 equals 0. Okay. So I just pulled out the lead coefficient from just those first 2 terms. Okay. Okay. Step 2 starts like normal. Okay. It doesn't finish like normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this number next to x like I've been doing. What do I do with that number? So when you're negative 8, divide it by 2. That gives me negative 4. And then I'm going to square that result. So I have 16. So on the left side, I'm going to add 16 inside. Make sure you add it inside the parentheses. Okay? All right? Let's see if anyone knows the answer to this. I added 16 inside of these parentheses on the left. What do I have to add to the right?
16.
You would think, right? This is a little counterintuitive. So I added a 16 inside these parentheses. What number multiplies everything inside the parentheses, though? 2. So what do I really have to add to the right side? 32, yep. Right, I added 16 inside the parentheses, but because there's a times 2 in here, I really added 32. So I need to add 32 to the other side, okay? So when you have to do step 1, it changes up step 2 a little bit as well, okay? So I have 2 times x squared minus 8x plus 16 plus 41 equals 32, okay? Okay, and then what do these terms inside the parentheses factor to? It's going to be x minus 4, right? First term's always an x. The second one is that yellow highlighted number divided by 2. Okay, so I have 2 times that. Plus 41 equals 32. Okay. At this point, we're finished completing the square. Now we can just go ahead with our square root property. All right, so I'm going to subtract 41. I'm trying to get the red stuff by itself first. What was that, negative 9? Okay. Then I'm going to divide by 2. Got to get rid of that 2. All right. So I have x minus 4 quantity squared equals negative 9 halves. Take the square root of both sides. So I have x minus 4 equals plus or minus 3i over root 2. Okay. So I have a square root of 2 in my denominator here on the right. Can I have that? Did you guys ever have a teacher that didn't want you to do that? Yeah, well, you should have, okay? How do I get, we are not allowed in mathematics to leave a square root in a denominator. So how do I get rid of that? Exactly. I multiply the top and bottom of that fraction by the square root of 2, by whatever is down here in the bottom, okay? So the bottom just becomes a regular 2, so I have x minus 4 equals something over 2 plus or minus something over 2, and the top becomes 3i root 2, okay? So we essentially do a little trick that allows us to move that square root to the top, okay? And I'm just going to add 4, okay, to get x by itself. So my two solutions are x equals 4 plus 3i root 2 over 2, and x equals 4 minus 3i root 2 over 2. All right? Problem solved. Oh yeah, you want to go back to the top? Zoom out. How does this class get out? 1 or 12:55? Like me move to the left or move the screen to the left?
Can I go to the back?
Yeah. 1? Oh, it ends at 1, okay. Cool. Yeah, back.
It's right after lunch.
Yeah, it's kind of. He's got it. All right, let's move on to G because I do have to get to the quadratic formula. Okay, so G. So G. All right, am I in standard form? Yes, I am in standard form, okay? What's my lead coefficient? 3, okay. Okay. So, you would think we'd have to do step 1, right? You would think, but there is a way to get rid of the 3. There's a way to get rid of it without having to just factor out the first 2 terms. What's my GCF here? Is there a GCF? Yes, there is. 3. So I can pull a 3 out. I can pull the 3 out of every term. So when you can pull it out of every single term, you actually can skip step 1, and here's how you do that. So you pull the 3 out of every term. Right, on this other one I couldn't do that, right? Because 41 is not divisible by 2. There was no GCF. Here there's a GCF of 3. So I can rewrite it as 3 times these 3 terms equals 0, okay? And how do I get rid of that 3? Yeah. Divide by 3. Yeah. If I divide by 3 on both sides, the 3's cancel out there. What's 0 over 3? 0, yep. Now look. Ooh, yep, now we can skip step 1, yay! Okay, so we can just highlight the number right next to x. That's 18. Let's divide my 18 by 2, that gives me 9. Let's square it, that gives me 81. Okay, let's add 81 to both sides. Don't combine like terms yet, though. Okay. What is this guy in the middle factor to?
X plus 9.
X plus 9, quantity squared. Yep, good job. The 1, 2, 3 from the beginning. We pulled a 3 out of it. Okay, 123 divided by 3 is 49. Good question. Okay. Now I can get the red stuff on its own and solve using the square root property.
Is there a square root like mode on our calculator?
There's a square root button on the calculator. Yeah. This is what? 2 root plus or minus 2 root 10? Okay, so one solution is negative 9 plus 2 root 10. One is negative 9 minus 2 root 10. Negative 9 minus 2.
Are you still recording?
Yeah, I'm still recording. It's all recorded. Yeah, so we've got about 10 minutes left to go through the quadratic. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to finish writing, and then I got to go through the quadratic formula. We're not going to get through all the examples, but I did make a video, 9-minute video, that I was going to have you guys watch for homework before I figured out we had a regular length period, so don't have to do that. Okay.
Wait, so we're doing 8.2 notes as well?
Yeah, we're going to do the 8.2 notes. They're really easy, actually. I brushed over it with my B period, and they all said it was fine. It was a lot easier than completing the square stuff, so feel comfortable. Okay, so that's one way to solve quadratic equations for x. That's one way. Another way, this way requires much less critical thought, right? It should be familiar from Algebra 1. It is the quadratic formula. Okay? So instead of having to go through all these steps to solve for x, the quadratic formula has one step. Really one major step. The quadratic formula tells us that for any quadratic equation, x is always equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So write that down, very important, very important. Write that formula down, and I'll tell you where a, b, and c come from. How we get those. Okay? Quadratic formula is very important, write it down. Most important formula ever. Not ever, but very important. Okay? All right. Okay, so, yeah, get that written down. Okay, so here's where those A, B, and C come from, okay? So first make sure you're in standard form. Okay, always important. Okay, make sure you're in standard form. Okay, so number 1, or part A, okay? So lead coefficient here is technically 1, okay? We call the number next to x squared a, okay? So here a is equal to 1, all right? We call the number next to x, next to that x variable, our b. So here our b is equal to 5. And we call the constant term, the term with no variables, we call that c. So our c is equal to 6. So that's like the first step. Just make sure you know what a, b, and c are equal to for that problem. And then you can plug it all into the quadratic formula, okay? Okay, so x equals the opposite of b. Here my b is positive 5. The opposite of positive 5 is negative 5. Plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6. So I'm just plugging numbers in. All over 2 times 1. So I just plugged in what my values for A, B, and C are in this problem. Okay, what's up? Yeah. All right. Okay. So this is the answer. This is the answer. We just got to simplify it in our calculator. And here's the best way to do that. So I tell students, okay, I'm going to use green. Crunch this in your calculator, crunch that in your calculator, and then rewrite the problem, okay? So we're going to do 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6. Don't square root it yet. Yeah, don't square root. So that comes to 1. So the stuff underneath the square root simplifies to the square root of 1. And the bottom 2 times 1 is just 2. Okay? And then off Tina's point, then I say, then like simplify the square root. What part are you confused on? Yeah. So I just simplified all this down to 1 in my calculator. This is just a lot. To put all this in your calculator at once is a lot. So I'm like, hey, this will just do it in bits and pieces. Do this part first, copy it down here. Do this part second, copy it down there. Okay. Now let's simplify the square root. The square root of 1 is just 1. 1 all over 2. So my two answers are x equals negative 5 plus 1 over 2, which is negative 4 over 2, or negative 2. Second solution is negative 5 minus 1 all over 2, which is negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. Okay. So that's how you use the quadratic formula. Hopefully that's a little familiar from Algebra 1. All right. It's really like most of the mistakes you make on these are going to be you messed up with your calculator. Okay. It's not too hard to just use the formula and plug stuff in. All right. Yeah.
So we can use either method? Is that what you're saying? Or?
In general, okay, if you're like an engineer, yes. But some of these problems on the test are going to be like, use this method, use that method. So you need it all.
So if we said minus 7, would we put negative 7? So like, I'm looking at the second one.
Second
Or
one.
like,
Yeah, C would be negative 7. I'm actually going to use part E. I'm going to use part E next, problem E, because that's a really good one to illustrate with. Okay? What's my A here? 2. Yep. My B is what? Negative 11. My C is 23. Okay? So my quadratic formula, right? Opposite of B plus or minus B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Okay? My quadratic formula tells me, and my answer is going to be the opposite of B. B is negative 11, so what's the opposite of B here?
11.
Positive 11 plus or minus the square root of negative 11 squared. Big point I'm about to make here. Okay? That negative 11, my negative 11 squared has to be inside parentheses, especially when you put it in your calculator, okay? All right, let me show you something with your calculator, okay? You need to make sure you do, if you do negative 11 squared without parentheses, you'll get the wrong answer. You get negative 121. That's the wrong answer, okay? You need to do left parenthesis, negative 11, right parenthesis, squared, okay? Hit enter, that'll give you the right answer, okay? So you need to do the negatives in parentheses, okay? So negative 11 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 2 times 23, negative 63. So I'm going to crunch this in my calculator. Get x equals 11 plus or minus the square root of negative 63 all over 4. All right. So then next step, let's simplify that square root. It's going to be 11 plus or minus, what does that simplify to? 3i root 7. Okay, so one answer is going to be 11 fourths plus 3i root 7 over 4. The other one's going to be 11 fourths minus 3i root 7 over 4, okay? Your homework is from pages 490 and 500 through 502 from the book. So the book is right here. Take some pictures. 490 and then 500 in addition to 490 through, or 500 through 502. So here's 500 through 502, and we also need 490. Hey, good work today, guys. Much better.